Everyone, therefore, who acknowledges me before others, I also will acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever denies me before others, I also will deny before my Father in heaven. Matthew 10:32 and 33. Alright, so this is my 1999 Chevy Astro van. It's an all-wheel drive, and I've got a condition where I'm losing brake fluid right from the center of the front bumper, and so there's the line comes from the anti-lock brake module around across the front frame member, and I'll show you that in a minute, and over here, and this is the end where the brake line comes up. So the brake line comes from the wheel cylinder over here and up here, and it stops right above this frame knuckle. Okay, and so I had a hard time figuring out which wrench to use because that's completely blind. So I had to take the this mud flap out of the way, and so what I ended up using was a 14 millimeter 14 millimeter open end wrench, and you can see it fits nicely on there, and I didn't have any trouble with that being rusted or anything, so it came off very nicely. It's just very slow. I did have trouble turning it, so what I had to do was, there's this plastic piece here, some kind of a bowl thing. I'm not exactly sure what that is, but it was mounted right up here with a couple of bolts right there, and so I took those little bolts out of there, and that allowed me enough room to swing my wrench to get that loose. And that line, and there's a couple of maybe kind of hard to see here, but there's one open right there, and I just took a screwdriver, those little plastic clips that hold the brake line, and just stuck a screwdriver through the end of it, or underneath the end of it, and then popped it right open, and they hinge open. So if I do a good enough job bending the new brake tube, then I'll be able to reuse those clips. Okay, so what I did here was I took and pried this out a little bit, and even bent the top of it up a little bit so I could pull this brake line out from underneath there, so I can straighten it out and have a shot to take it back that way. So here's another view of it. So we're looking, in the wheelhouse, and then underneath the front fascia, so the fascia's still on. So as you're looking at it here, the member that brake line runs along is this one right here, and there you can see the lip. If I get out of the way, you can see the lip right there, and so that brake line's just right on top of that lip, and it runs the length to the other side. It comes from over there, and then it runs along the frame member here, and there's one of those little plastic clips that you just pry open, and it hinges on the back, and so it's running just right in there's a little lip on the frame member here, and it sits right behind that electrical wire up there, and it just runs the length of that. And then once I trace the other end, I'll show you where it goes and how to get it out of there. Okay, so this is the other wheel. Again, I pulled the mud flap down, and looking in there, you can see where that brake line makes a turn. There's not one of those little plastic clips that I've already popped open, and then it looks like it's just going to run along the top of the frame, and then back underneath. The anti-lock brake module is up underneath the passenger door, under here, and I'll get under there and show you that too. Okay, and so I pulled the wheel liner out a little bit more, and so you go past the shock absorber in there, you can see the brake lines re-emerge, and then they come together with the others, and then they all run back along there to the anti-lock brake module, which maybe we can get under here and see that. Okay, and so this is the all-wheel drive. So there's another drive shaft over here. This is right behind the driver's side wheel. And so you come up here, and you can see right there where the brake lines are coming down from where I showed you before above the wheelhouse, and they kind of disappear under this cover. Not that. It's the exhaust pipe. Over here, there's a black cover that goes over the anti-lock brake module, and there's some bolts in here that you take off. So this may be a little better view of that. There's two bolts, that one there and one there, that you take off, and then that cover will come off, and this plate here stays with it, and that's what the module is mounted on top of. This is just a protective cover to keep it from getting damaged. And that's where the other end of that brake line goes. And when I get that cover off, you'll be able to see that. Okay, so that is the cover and the two nuts that hold it on. And up here, those are the bolts that we're holding that cover on. So you can see there's 6 connectors, and the one that we want for the front passenger brake line is the middle one on the top row. And so what I used before to get that, I had replaced the one for the rear, which is the one on the right, and I had to use a crow's foot and a little quarter drive ratchet to get that off of there. So I think there you can see it. So I have that little thing called a crow's foot, and there's a hex fitting on it that fits right around and that one's a 14, I think. So that is the crow's foot out here where you can see it better. And so after I turned it the first time, it broke loose, and I was able just to use this much of it without the ratchet to just pull it off and then position it again and then turn it by hand. And so I was able to work that off there without too much difficulty. So as I'm looking at these other lines that are attached to the electronic brake control module, And following them up here a little bit, they are also pretty rusty. So I've decided to go ahead and replace those as well, so that we don't have another brake line blowout here very soon. And this is the other side for the brake line that goes to the wheel cylinder, which I have already taken loose. Same thing right here as the other side is a 14 millimeter either open end wrench or I used the crow's foot on this one. It was a little easier to get to in this case. So that's that end of it. So back there is a little clip that I have just popped open. You can see how it's kind of sticking up a little bit. But it clamped two of the brake lines together. So I just simply stuck a screwdriver in this end of it, and it just gently pried it a little bit, and it popped open. So the driver's side left front brake is this line right here on the upper left side. Alright, so I replaced the brake cylinder lines, and also I wanted to replace the ones that go to the master cylinder because they were also questionable. And I went to take the line off of the rear portion of the master cylinder, and I noticed that it is actually a larger size brake line than the front. So the fronts were 3/16 and the rear was a quarter. So that's the way that you can tell which one goes to the rear portion of the master cylinder, which is actually the front chamber. Let me show you that. So this is the master cylinder. It's empty. I pulled the top off and cleaned it out. But this portion towards me, right here, is for the rear brakes. And so that's the one with the line. Probably kind of difficult there, but you can see. You can see the two fittings. So the rear one, larger line, goes to the front fitting, goes to the front rear brakes, and this one back here goes to the front brakes. So it's actually in the rear of the master cylinder. So the here's the brake control module, and the one on the lower left, which I have a loose line there ready to be hooked up, is the front brakes, and the one on the lower right is the rear brakes, and that's the feed from the master cylinder. So that would be this one over here is rear brakes, and this one over here is for the front brakes, and the middle thing is just an electrical connector that I pulled off of there for ease of access. Okay, so this is the line that I took out, and I'm replacing it with this kind of copper colored alloy. It's much softer than the original steel brake lines, and plus it won't corrode. So that is what I'm using. I just got that from the auto parts store. It's about $50 for that roll. And so what I did was I cut off a piece of it, and kind of got the rough shape of the line that I cut. And you know, it's not necessary to be terribly precise, but since I was able to get this piece out in one solid piece, I just kind of formed the rough bends that I needed, and then I'm going to reuse the fittings, and so I'll just clean these up on a wire wheel and then reinstall them. They're different sizes, so you know, you have to kind of make sure which end goes on which side, but actually the nut part of it is the same size, but the threads are and the tube sizes. Well, the tube size is the same, but the threads are different thickness.